high volume, preferably in a residential area.
To boldly go where no one has gone before.
As Carson said, the health of this otherwise healthy guy, just shy of his 58th birthday. What can you tell us you were able to pick up? How was he? How did he seem? All of it.
I mean, he looked maybe 40. He looks fantastic, honestly. I've never seen someone that healthy. He, I mean, partly because of his faith, Jehovah's Witness, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, didn't eat meat. He seemed fit and happy. He's incredibly friendly, way more accessible than I ever would have imagined. I mean, he seems like such a remote figure and so iconic and so mysterious. Then you meet him, he's actually really warm and open and kind, and you can't record him. You also can't take notes in front of him. He prefers not to have his voice recorded, which is difficult, obviously, when you're writing a piece, but really thoughtful and well-spoken, really opinionated about a lot of things, incredibly on top of current pop culture, was really into new music, into mentoring new artists. Just, I mean, it was an unforgettable day to spend with him. There's nobody else like him, and there never will be.
You're the second journalist to come on and say not only could you not record his voice, but you couldn't take notes. And I'm sitting here wondering, does one just report the thoughts and feelings of Prince? How do you do a direct quote, or is that just verboten?
For a journalist, it's pretty much pure panic, but honestly, I cheated a little bit by, I would go to the bathroom and take notes in the bathroom in between, just try to repeat in my head some of the better things that he had said, and I said to him, to his face, I'm really worried about misquoting you, and I want to do justice to the things that we're talking about and really put your voice on the page, but that was just the way he preferred to do things. At one point, he did allow people to record him, but I think he felt that someone had misused, a recording once, and after that, he just made that his new rule.
It was so interesting, and to hear you say how warm he was, how accessible he was, I guess it's based on all those years of just not seeing him, the veil of mystery that we all assumed that once you were in his presence, he would be a kind of introvert plus. But your description doesn't sound like that at all.
No, he came and met me himself at the door. I apologize for being on the phone. I think he offered me a snack at least 4 or 5 times. He kept asking me if I was hungry. I think that he had to have a little bit of a guard around him because it's pretty hard for Prince to go undercover. I mean, that face and just his whole look and the charisma that he had. He wasn't exactly going undercover, and I think that is a lot of the reason that he stayed. He was outside Minneapolis. He had his compound there, but he was, his chauffeur, who he conscripted to drive me around while I was there, said that he goes grocery shopping, he goes out, he does it in his own way. He has a couple little disguises, that he likes to use, and I think there was a yearning in him, in some sense, to be normal, even though he absolutely knew that he was an exceptional person, and was proud of that. I think that, at the end of the day, he did like to connect with people, and he didn't want to be isolated.
Boy, it raises a lot of questions.
I know, and we've had stars before. I mean, David Bowie, obviously, who we lost, he did not tell anyone that he was sick. He had cancer, but this I can't think of a recent death. I mean, as much as amazing as Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston were, we knew they were troubled. We knew there were substance abuse issues, health problems. This feels way more unexpected to me than those deaths, and that sort of makes it harder to kind of process and believe that it's real.
Yeah, at a very basic level, he took very good care of himself.
Amazing care of himself. He lived like a dancer, you know. I mean, that was the first thing I thought when I saw him, is that he moved like one, and he just seemed so graceful and so clear-eyed and so healthy and sort of in command of his body and his faculties. So it's shocking.
Leah Greenblatt, Entertainment Weekly, thank you for adding so much to this conversation and filling in some blanks. I think his fans are happy to hear all of Leah Greenblatt's descriptions. The Reverend Al Sharpton has been patiently listening to all our coverage, watching our coverage, and waiting. And Reverend, I'm wondering, you've now had the benefit of listening to all these people. It's like the parable of the blind men and the elephant. Everyone's describing another portion of this artist who you were lucky enough to know, and we're still days away from getting the real oomph, the feeling of what his absence is going to mean.
Yeah, I think that all of us are trying to talk through our shock. I mean, it's like when you have something that numbs you and you're trying to act as if you can function, and I think all of us are trying to collect our thoughts. But it was very important to me, as I'm still dealing with the shock waves of this personally and with millions around the world, that people know that this man, this brother, had a depth to him that was very much, yes, the musical genius, yes, the innovator, but was very much concerned about humanity. And he was not the kind of person that you would call for a cause. He would call you if he was interested. It would always be unexpected times. As I said to you, Brian, when we were in the middle of fighting around the Trayvon Martin case, he called me out of the clear blue sky and said, I want to help the family, Reverend. Just make sure this gets to the family of getting to you. And it was a substantial amount of resources. And he came to Baltimore and did a concert to help the families around the whole question of policing. And he would do things in the humanitarian and civil rights area just like he did in music. He set his own beat. He literally personified that expression that he marched to the beat of his own drum. He did it in music, and he did it in the community. And then geniuses like him. I was very close, as I said, with James Brown. I was closer with Michael Jackson. And both of them, in private, removed from Prince, always admired him, and he would question me about them and the conversations that we would have. And when you have people that were unique and had reached such levels as them giving him respect, it showed the kind of regard he had. He was in a class by himself, and he will go down as one of the greats. Whatever we find out in the next few hours and the next few days will not amount to anything that will capture the contributions he's made to the world's music, not just American, world music, and in changing the course of how we heard music and how we were entertained. That cannot be changed no matter what. And I think that this man should also be remembered for what he and Attorney Londell McMillan did in terms of standing up for artists' rights at great sacrifice to himself. I think it was unparalleled in how he fought for the rights of artists, even giving up his name, a name that he had built and sacrificed and branded for many years.
Reverend Al Sharpton, who, as he points out, has been lucky enough in the course of his lifetime to know some icons in this business, from James Brown to Michael Jackson to the man whose passing we've been reporting today. Prince is gone at the age of 57. Reverend, thank you very much for being patient with us and for sharing your memory. On the other side of the screen, since we've been talking, you've seen a number of videos. If you've grown up in the last 3 decades. your age. It's in the canon of work you will remember from Prince. But again, all we've been talking about is his genre, his sound, his range, being a musical polymath, knowing how to play every instrument, knowing music backwards and forwards. And after watching that and hearing the tempo of the song and hearing all the departments within the song, also remember Sinead O'Connor, Nothing Compares to You, is a Prince song. So the incredible range in terms of tempo and emotion and content. And as we've been saying, the musical catalog he leaves behind, this guy who for long stretches of his life recorded every day, laid something down every day and had so much going on in his head. There will be time to learn more about his health and what happened to Prince to take his life at 57, a week after we got these reports. But after Howard, in these hours after learning of his death, in the days to come, the video that's playing the other half of the screen is just going to be ubiquitous. Yeah. And it's going to be, as we call it in the industry, wallpaper. And most of it is all of a period. It's of a tempo, and as I keep pointing out, there's also a song as slow and beautiful and romantic and powerful as Nothing Compares to You. His range was extraordinary.
Yeah, and my hope is that once people kind of get over the initial shock and sort of check out all the sort of iconic songs and albums, that they'll delve a little deeper into what is truly one of the most diverse bodies of work in music history. He combined every genre you can imagine, and what we're lucky about, and it's one of the few positives that we can look at right now, is that he came about in a generation of the age of the music video. He sort of reached his peak at the same time as MTV's, and so most of his best work, a lot of his concert performances are easily accessible. And I think, you made this point earlier about him becoming more accessible in recent years. I think he started to show a sense of humor.
MTV, 20-somethings, they have no clue.
Remember the Chappelle Show sketch where he's playing basketball and serving pancakes to Eddie Murphy's brother. That's apparently a true story, and he sort of embraced that image himself. He put that on the cover of one of his single releases later. His presence on social media recently has shown he is a little bit tongue-in-cheek about himself. And I think that's a side of Prince that a lot of people didn't know. And I'm hoping that, unfortunately, despite the tragedy, that people are going to get to know him better now.
Yeah, SNL also had their share of fun with him over the years, but he was always said to enjoy that parody. He was in on the joke. For those who haven't concentrated on what he was, those not lucky enough to have been in his presence, those who have forgotten what he kind of appeared like and sounded
those
like.
who never knew
a
MTV
bit of his conversation with
not
Matt
the real
Lauer.
world
This is
and all
the Today Show back in
2004.
Prince talked to Matt Lauer about the release of Musicology.
Why is there such a difference between the personal Prince, the guy I see all the time, who's so quiet and so reserved and seemingly so shy? Seriously. And the guy who gets up on stage there and explodes.
I'm waking up now.
But why? I mean, what happens when you get on stage that creates that personality versus the more reserved personality?
Well, the music and the energy. I mean, that's 20,000 people there. You can't come on stage like you just got out of bed, so...
Is it still as much fun for you to get up on stage in front of those people as it was when you were young?
More fun, actually.
Younger, sorry about that.
Yeah, more fun, actually. Being out here so long, I've learned a lot, and I like showing off some of those new tricks.
And the last time I talked to you, you were just about to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and to be honest, you were a little blasé about it. You said personal accolades, don't really care that much, but wasn't it a bit of a trip to be there?
I was gas. I had no idea. What I really dug was the fact that musicians, all the musicians there, Jackson Brown, ZZ Top, and Tom Petty, and Jeff Lynne, and Donnie Harrison. I mean, we all speak the same language. It was just a gas talking to them.
One thing you said when you were inducted, you talked about spirituality and about how you hope that young artists today as they move on with their talent, they grasp a sense of spirituality because it'll help them in the long run. You think there's an absence of that among some of the new artists today?
Well, I don't know. I meet a lot of artists, but the record industry, they tend to promote things that are more salacious and hit-driven, I guess, to use a term. I kind of wish we got back to the days where the music was more like the soul music of the 60s and 70s, where Alicia Keys, I dig. I think she's kind of putting it out there. There's a few out there.
In other words, where the lyrics were what made you feel sexy, not the fact that you had barely anything on.
Yeah, this reality show nowadays. So.
But we start with this. If you are ever going to testify before Congress or testify before the United States Senate, one thing, not the most important thing, but one sort of important thing, if you're going to do that, is that you need to look the part, right? You need to dress like you're going to address the United States Senate. On that score, Dee Snider from the band Twisted Sister has always been at the top of my list for how to make the best visual impression possible when testifying before the United States Senate. That same day, back in 1985, that Senate committee had heard already from Frank Zappa, who was hilarious in his testimony, but who also wore a very nice conservative suit and a positively Trump-esque red Republican tie to give his hilarious testimony. That same committee had also heard from John Denver that day, the great John Denver, who was there to testify against censorship and against the sort of soft-form censorship that you start to ease into when you start putting official warning labels on different kinds of artistic expression. John Denver was there to testify against that kind of censorship. He was also there to make clear that his song Rocky Mountain High was not about that kind of high. But then in comes Dee Snider, God bless him, from Twisted Sister, pride of Long Island. And no, Dee Snider did not wear a suit and tie when he testified that day, far from it. But boy, was he prepared for that testimony and fired up. And when he walked in wearing that muscle shirt and slipped off his jean jacket vest with the arms ripped off and pulled out that piece of paper out of his pocket, I am quite sure this is not what the United States Senate was expecting from his testimony.
Thank you for having me here. I don't know if it's morning or afternoon. I'll say both. Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Dee Snider. That's S-N-I-D-E-R. I'm 30 years old. I'm married. I have a 3-year-old son. I was born and raised a Christian, and I still adhere to those principles. Believe it or not, I do not drink, I do not smoke, and I do not do drugs. I do play in and write the songs for a rock and roll band named Twisted Sister. I would like to use this occasion to speak on a more personal note and show just how unfair the whole concept of lyrical interpretation and judgment can be, and how many times this can amount to little more than character assassination. Accusation number 1. This attack was contained in an article written by Tipper Gore, which was given the form of a full page in my hometown newspaper on Long Island. In this article, Ms. Gore claimed that one of my songs, Under the Blade, had lyrics encouraging sadomasochism, bondage, and rape. The lyrics she quoted have absolutely nothing to do with these topics. On the contrary, the words in question are about surgery and the fear that it instills in people. As the creator of Under the Blade, I can say categorically that the only sadomasochism, bondage, and rape in this song is in the mind of Ms. Gore.
That was 1985. Dee Snider and his band Twisted Sister had been put on a sort of hit list by a group called the Parents Music Resource Center, which was founded in 1985 by, among others, then Senator Al Gore's wife, Tipper Gore, who you see on the left there. Also Susan Baker, who was married to the Treasury Secretary at the time, James Baker.
It could be the poster girls
they co-founded it along with a bunch of other well-connected
beware
Washington
whom you marry,
worthies
man.
who were very concerned about the filthifying of America's pop culture at the time. This was one of the great cultural freakouts of my lifetime. It is burned into my childhood memories. In the short run, that fight led to those neat black and white warning labels that you used to find on American music back when American music was a physical object that you bought at a store. There's 15 songs that the Parents Music Resource Council singled out as being particularly troubling pieces of music. Pieces of music that presumably they also found particularly helpful in trying to convince the whole country that there was something deeply wrong in our culture that we needed to be protected from or at least warned about, and these songs were it. And Twisted Sister had a huge hit song at the time called We're Not Gonna Take It. We're Not Gonna Take It was number 7 on that list of 15 for its supposedly violent content. But number 1 on that hit list was, of course, a song by Prince. It was the song Darling Nikki, which is, in fact, a really dirty song. Darling Nikki was the last song on side 1 of Prince's album Purple Rain, which came out in 1984. And Darling Nikki, thanks to the Parents Music Resource Council, very quickly became the poster child for what was so terribly wrong with American culture and American music specifically. And that came out in 1984, that record, and by 1985, we had those black explicit content warning stickers on our records. Even before the advent of those warning stickers in 1985, though, Prince's lyrics pushed the envelope so far. Prince's lyrics were so unapologetic and graphic about sex in particular that even before we got those rectangular black and white national warning stickers in 1985, before that, Warner Brothers had already started putting warning stickers on all of Prince's records. Prince's records, starting, I think, with his first record in 1978, they were all slapped with little custom stickers that said, contains language which may be unsuitable for some listeners. And boy, were those warning stickers effective. As a child growing up in the 1980s, there was no more powerful attractant to me in a record store than those little stickers. Come on, don't look at this. It's bad for you. Definitely don't pick this one up and take it home. You know, and so the parents and even lawmakers were in this bind, right? Because Prince was definitely their poster child for their own concerns about music that seemed way too sexy to be safe. But by making him their poster child for that concern, they ended up making a really fascinating and sexy poster, which made him not just something you might discover at your local record store if it was an excellent record store. It made him something you might discover on the news. It made him something you might hear about even if you knew nothing about music. And you know, we do this periodically as a country. It's almost like it's on a timer, at least for music. The previous panic over Elvis Presley's hip gyrations had passed. You know, just enough time had passed and America was ready for our next national freakout / crush / panic / fascination with an obscenely talented, genre-bending male musician and performer who gleefully scrambled our fairly rigid ideas about not only race, but specifically what male sexuality is supposed to look like. And so apparently we'd gotten over Elvis enough that we needed a new one, and by the 1980s it was Prince's turn. And the freak out and all the rest of it was unsubtle in every way. When his record Dirty Mind came out in 1980, Robert Christgau reviewed Dirty Mind for the Village Voice newspaper in New York. And he said this, quote, Mick Jagger should fold up his penis and go home. I'm telling you, it wasn't subtle. Even if you weren't bothered by it, even if you came to praise and not condemn, it was not subtle. You know, Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones, in fact, asked Prince to open up for them at a bunch of their shows right after Dirty Mind came out. But it turns out Rolling Stones fans can handle a lot from Mick Jagger. They could not handle it from Prince. They could not deal with Prince on stage. According to news reports at the time, Rolling Stones fans pelted Prince with food and bottles and basically booed him off the stage at Rolling Stones concerts. And so that arrangement did not last. Right? Such is the mind of America. Sticky fingers, sure. Dirty Mind? No. 1981, the New York Times sent Stephen Holden to review Prince at a live show he did in New York City while he was touring in support of Dirty Mind. Stephen Holden called Prince in that review, called him a wunderkind, said he was electrifying. called him a renegade in the manner of such black rock artists as Sly Stone and Jimi Hendrix. But then the culmination of his review was this. And I said that the freak out over Prince and Prince's frankness and glorification of sex was an unsubtle thing. It was very, very unsubtle. Even in the pages of The Old Gray Lady, the New York Times. Just check this out. I'm going to quote directly from Stephen Holden's review of that Prince show in 1981. Ready? Prince sings exclusively in a falsetto, which he pushes at times to an eerie, caterwauling intensity. This style is ideally suited to the theatrical lasciviousness that is central to Prince's act. On stage, Prince displays an unbridled street eroticism, wearing black bikini briefs, fringed high-heel boots, and thick thigh-high stockings. He is sexual license incarnate. I don't even know how Stephen Holden got home from that show that night, if that was the experience that he had in that club. You're sure you can still walk, sir? But actually, the way he ends that review is just as important. This is the end of the review. Prince is such a charismatic performer, though, that his stylized salaciousness does not offend. With his sassy grace and precocious musicality, he is heir to the defiant rock and roll traditions of Elvis Presley, Mick Jagger, and again, Jimi Hendrix. So that was the spring of 1981 after Dirty Mind came out. But by that fall, Prince would have another incredible record out called, fittingly, Controversy. Right? Key lyrics in the title track, which you remember. Am I black or white? Am I straight or gay? Do I believe in God? Do I believe in me? That's the song that also then features him reciting the whole Lord's Prayer from beginning to end. You know, Our Father who art in heaven, he says the whole prayer, followed shortly thereafter by saying, people call me rude, I wish we all were nude. The pace at which Prince came out with these unbelievably good seminal records, and I mean that in both senses, the pace at which he worked was incredible. You remember that song, I Want to Be Your Lover? That was on his self-titled record that came out in 1979. So, For You came out, I think it was his first record came out in 1978, then Prince came out in 1979, Dirty Mind came out in 1980, Controversy came out in 1981, 1999 came out in 1982. Right, and 1989 had that huge title song hit on it, Let's Party Like It's 1999, right? And then that also had Little Red Corvette and Delirious. And then only 2 years after that, in 1984, he came out with Purple Rain, which is one of the all-time greatest records ever made by an American musician. Right, the title track, Purple Rain, Let's Go Crazy, Take Me With You, When Doves Cry, I Would Die For You, all of those hits were on that one record. Not to mention Darling Nikki, which curled Tipper Gore's hair, which scandalized the country to the point of distraction, and which brought us Dee Snider in the United States Senate, looking amazing, sticking up for the Christian values of Long Island, and sparking some interesting conversation about the fear of surgery in his lyrics. And all of these years later, all of these albums later, all of these remarkably eclectic hits later, after changing his name to an unpronounceable symbol, after the one album he released that you see here, which was called Love Sexy, with the kind of adorable fairy-like naked picture of himself on the cover. That was the record where he insisted that all 9 songs of the album be released as a single track on the CD, so you could not skip between them. You had to listen to them all at once, even though there were 9 different songs, no matter what. After all of his eccentric brilliance, after his epic fights with his record company, after one of the greatest Super Bowl halftime performances of all time, after all of this, there may be an American somewhere who still sees Prince as a news story, who still sees him as a scandal or as a risk to the nation somehow. My guess is if you still believe that, you probably also believe that Twisted Sister is violent and threatening as well. But for all the ways that he was used politically, for all the resistance and fear he engendered, for all the radio stations that wouldn't touch him for years, he still stands apart from almost every other musician and artist who found themselves vilified by politicians or objectified as some sign of cultural degeneracy. I mean, a lot of artists have had that put on them. But he still stands apart from all of them, at least in the modern music world, for one reason, which is that basically in his generation of musicians, no one was as good. No one was in his league. Prince was not like anyone among the other musicians of his time. I mean, part of that you could tell from the small print on his records. You know, flip over one of his records, open up the insert that comes with the record, and there it is, on all of them. Produced, arranged, composed, and performed by Prince. Look up the credits for Purple Rain alone, just for that one astonishing record. In the Washington Post obituary for him today, they quote the AllMusic credits for Purple Rain. AllMusic is basically an index listing. In this case, it's who did what on that record. And all the credits are done in alphabetical order. So for Purple Rain, for that incredible record with all of those hit singles on it. So for Purple Rain, alphabetically, the arranger was Prince. The bass was played by Prince. The composer was Prince. The guitar was Prince. The keyboards were Prince. The primary artist was Prince. The producer was Prince. The vocals were Prince. The background vocals were also Prince. He was his own studio band. He produced all of his own records starting when he was a teenager. He wrote everything he ever did. In addition to writing everything he ever did, including some of the best pop songs of all time, he wrote some of the other best pop songs of the 1980s that were recorded by other people. I Feel For You by Chaka Khan, that was Prince. Manic Monday by the Bengals, that was Prince. Nothing Compares to You by Sinead O'Connor, that was Prince. In terms of his live performances alone, there are fans of Bruce Springsteen who will wax as rhapsodic about the experiences of seeing a live Springsteen show. But other than that, I'm not sure there is any comparison in his era. From the previous generation, the best comparison ever made for him as a performer was James Brown, which of course then leads to the famous tape of James Brown in 1983, inviting Prince up on stage with him at a concert in Los Angeles, whereupon Prince, standing right next to James Brown, promptly steals the show. Gets on stage with James Brown, grabs somebody else's random guitar from some member of the band who was previously playing on stage. Prince grabs the other guy's guitar, wanders around a little bit looking for a pick, finally gets the guy to give him a pick, settles the guitar in his hip, having never touched that instrument before, and takes over and absolutely shreds. Like while James Brown looks on in disbelief. So that was his marching order, right? James Brown, right? The giants of previous generations. And we all only get to live in one period of time called a lifetime. And over the course of all of our lifetimes, there will not be that many cultural geniuses and cultural giants who we live among. There are only a few in every generation.
1984's Purple Rain made him a global superstar.
Purple Rain was huge, #1 for almost half a year. One of the biggest selling soundtracks of all time, a landmark album not just for Prince, but also for rock music.
Prince, like Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Bruce Springsteen, reshaped what it meant to be a pop music artist. He was a fixture on MTV for much of the 1980s and 90s. His landmark performance of Get Off on the 1991 MTV Video Music Awards proved that he was not only one of the greatest video artists of all time, but was equally great performing live.
With Prince, it's very easy to just say, that guy gave great shows, that guy made great records, and that guy stayed true to himself for his entire career.
Another tragic loss. There's a heaviness in the air for sure. It's sad, but at the same time, you know, I mean, his legend does live on and will continue to inspire other musicians.
Today, MTV, which almost never plays music videos anymore, paid tribute to the icon by suspending its regular programming, changing its logo to purple, and playing a music video marathon of his many hits. 3 decades after his videos helped revolutionize music television, his death brought MTV back to the days when Prince was king.
Yeah, Brian, I got to MTV in the late 90s, and I went there as a radio disc jockey and a huge, huge lover of music because they played music television. I would leave probably 8 years later because they decided to stop playing music videos, that is, and today it was kind of cool to see them go back to that format and to watch those Prince videos, man. He was the best.
People that have essentially shut down a portion of First Avenue. Now, For those who may not know, First Ave, the nightclub, is the club that Prince made famous all those many years ago. So there are a number of local bands that are playing, and of course playing a lot of Prince's big hits that he has had over the last several years. It's kind of odd to say this, but it's an electric feeling here, despite the fact that, of course, people are mourning this loss. But all day, people have come to First Ave, laying flowers, teddy bears, just wanting to be close to this place, because here in Minneapolis, when you think of Prince, you think of First Ave.
You sure do. And a sound so recognizable it became known as the Minneapolis Sound. Thank you very much, Jay Olstad from KARE 11 KARE. Just as Long Islanders are proud of Billy Joel, folks in Jersey are proud of the boss. They were really proud of Prince in Minnesota and the Twin Cities. Another break. Our coverage, our remembrance continues after this. And he just casually tossed into the conversation that at one point in his career, Prince was making a song a day. If you're a music fan, you just can't get over that, because it's the unreleased material that is going to be the treasure trove for generations to come. How does that get produced, curated? Who starts to go through it, and into whose loving arms does that material get passed?
I have no idea, but I'd like to be in the room just to hear some of it. I mean, this guy revolutionized the music business, revolutionized music, image, the whole thing. I mean, every guy wanted to be Prince. Every woman wanted to be with Prince. I mean, how does that come along? I mean, I think it's once in a lifetime, somebody like that, and I can't wait to hear this music. I mean, he operated from a much deeper place, and those songs came from deep within him, and I'm just so grateful to be alive to even hear this music and feel this music.
And Ricky, he was really music's iceberg, in that for what we saw above the surface, for the records we bought and the songs we loved, there's a multitude of people who were helped by him. There's a multitude of people who were influenced by him. There's a multitude of people who got their self-image and their strength to live their life by watching him.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree.
Ricky, what was the last time you saw him, last time you worked with him?
I think the last time that I saw him was performing at the Forum here in LA, and he had a sold-out nights, just announce nights and perform and give the people, bring the music to the people. He was a true performer, and everyone was on their feet, you know, every second. I mean, no one sits down at Prince concert. You just don't. You're just afraid you're going to miss something. I mean, he's just electric.
And there's a list circulating of 27, 28 different instruments that he was proficient on. Most people, you walk into a recording studio, you see a wall of electric guitars. You either know how to play those or you don't, but then you see a Hammond organ, you see a drum kit, you see the stuff of recording. And he was such a musical polymath, or whatever the term was. There wasn't much need for many credits on his albums if he was playing everything.
No, I mean, not at all. That first record came out, and it said all instruments by Prince. And, I mean, from that point on, I mean, you just had to watch everything, the singing and his performance level. I mean, he studied James Brown. He studied Jimi Hendrix. He was a great songwriter, a great artist, but he was a great musician. And so he was a musician's musician. I mean, that guy could play.
Teray, does it give you chills to think that the greatest Prince song, the most influential Prince music, may be in a reel-to-reel tape canister? It may be on a thumb drive. It may be in a laptop.
It could be. I mean, we think about, you know, Tupac and other people. The music keeps on coming out. The label could go in there and have us listening to new Prince music for a decade or more. I mean, if he was truly doing a song a day, that could be 600-900 songs created in a 3-4 year period that we haven't heard most of them. So, yeah, I mean, you know, I'm interested to hear that music and see what comes out of it. And, you know, too, Ricky was talking about the performance, you know, and it was one thing to be at a Prince concert, like at Madison Square Garden or something, but he would always leave that show and do a little show at some club somewhere. I remember seeing him at SOB's with Questlove on the drums and D'Angelo playing the keyboards, and it was amazing.
If you want to know about Prince, the guitar player of all of his instruments, you see Tom Petty and Danny Harrison there. That was the '04 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction concert. The band for years and years and years, directed by Paul Schaefer. But that was While My Guitar Gently Weeps in the hands of Prince, an incredible guitar solo worth watching all over again. Another gathering in Los Angeles that our cameras have spotted east of the Crenshaw neighborhood in Leimert Park. Tonight, I'm told we just lost our live picture, but you should have seen it. We are back with the man who wrote the book on Prince, and that's Teray. I like asking prominent musicians, what one piece of your work would you hang in the Louvre Museum? What would it be? And this calls for a judgment on your part, but you're his biographer. What do you think Prince would have said? Hang this in the Louvre.
Well, you know, one thing about Prince is he was always looking forward. He never wanted to look back, which was part of the changing of the name thing, that we're moving forward. So if you asked him that, he would say, the next album, right? Because the next thing is the greatest thing that I'll ever do. If he thought something he did in the past was the greatest thing he ever did, then that would be a failure, right? So it always has to be the next thing. So whatever next album or tour he was working on, that would be the thing that he would want in the proverbial Louvre until the next album is about to come out.
Let's talk about the influence Prince had, especially on his younger fans. This sounds funny to say. Prince's hair was hugely influential.
Absolutely.
And when he kind of made his debut with an afro, that was a big day.
It was a big day, and it was a big change. We've gotten so used to seeing him with the long, straight hair. Yeah. I mean, you know, he paid so much attention to the outfits, you know, and the image, you know, I mean, that stuff was so beautiful. But, you know, I hope that when we remember him, we will remember this was the hardest working man in show business. And I am sorry to my mom and the other James Brown fans who are heartbroken to change that throne, but this man worked insanely hard at recording, at rehearsing, at every aspect of being a superstar. And this is why he had an album a year for many, many years, and most of them fantastic, and did amazing tours, and then great club shows. And this is the hardest working man, and this is proof that you can come from anywhere in America. If you work hard enough and you believe in yourself so much, that you can create anything. This is a person who was basically homeless at 13, that he had left both his parents' homes, and he makes himself into one of the greatest rock stars of our time.
Someone said today that, unlike when a lot of famous people die, the kind of negative stories, they wait an appropriate amount of time and then they come out. The thing that's going to happen with Prince is all these artists are going to come out of the woodwork with amazing stories about him, the people who were down on the luck, and he basically subsidized their lives. They're people who he would hand songs to. Let's not forget Nothing Compares to You, Sinead O'Connor. For folks who don't know the Prince musical canon, there's a lot there, and there sure was a lot to his career.
Yeah, and you remind me, too, of Manic Monday.
Yeah,
right? Little Bangles song,
yeah.
Right? Nobody thought that Prince would be writing a song for the Little Bangles, and it seems like a silly pop song, and then you go through the lyrics. This is a really great written pop song, and it's really brilliant. I mean, she starts talking about, I was in the middle of a dream, kissing Valentino by a crystal blue Italian stream. You don't hear that kind of writing in a pop song in America, but Prince would deliver that sort of stuff all the time in his sleep.
I also can't help but think we music fans have grown up in a great time. It's a great time to have been alive, to love music. Teray is the author of the book, I Would Die For You. He's been a friend of ours around here a long time, journalist and author. Thank you.
Thank you
very much for co-piloting us through this hour here tonight. And finally tonight, everyone has their favorite, especially among Prince fans, but his performance at Super Bowl 41 in the rain in Miami, '07, one of his most memorable outings ever, considered to be among the best performances in Super Bowl history. When Prince was told it was going to be raining during halftime, he is reported to have asked, his only question was, could you make it rain a little harder?
Feel good. This life,